For the last 3 years, between recording segments of the D6 generation, Russ, Craig, and Rafe have had various conversations that have spanned the interests of gamerdom worldwide. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, The Lost Chapters.
Hey, and welcome back to Dunkin' Donuts. Ooh. And we would like to welcome to our local little donut establishment, Curt Covert.
Hey, Curt. Hey there. Can I have a cruller?
You may. Chocolate
it's kind of a waste of a trip to Dunkin' Donuts, but you can have a cruller if that's your fashion.
Crullers are good. What do you like, chocolate or plain? What are your favorite cruller?
Well, if I can get a chocolate one, sure.
Done. Chocolate glaze coming up.
Oh, yeah, chocolate glaze cruller. It's right there.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. That's good.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to just get a... You know what? I'm going to go for the double chocolate. The chocolate glazed with chocolate topping regular donut.
The double chocolate.
That's some serious chocolate right there.
I used to work at Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I was the Muffin Man.
Oh, nice.
The Muffin Man? Now we do.
I do know the Muffin Man. You know, have you seen the McDonald's commercial where they're baking the stuff, the new muffins? And they sing, "Do you know the Muffin Man? The Muffin Man?" And then it transitions in the middle to, "Do you know the Danish man?" Because they're making Danishes. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, it sounds like you're looking for someone from Denmark. I don't really understand. Didn't work for me.
Wow. That's right.
That's where I went with that.
That's being all judgmental on the McDonald's guy.
The Danish man. I mean, I don't know. Anyway,
no, okay. I get it.
So we're not here to talk about Danish, although
no. What we're here to talk about. We were talking back and forth with Curt when he graciously accepted our invitation to come on and take up the third C.
Right.
And one of the things that we started talking about was he was very excited about a new game that's just been re-released. Not a new game, an old game. And he got to talking about that. He was very passionate and excited about that. And that got us to thinking about what were the games back in the day, back in our earliest memories of gaming that kind of inspired us and sort of shaped us as the gamers that we are. And so I thought it would be neat if we just sit around at Dunks and chatted about the games from our past and what they kind of did to shape us into the people that we are and what they inspired us to accomplish along the way.
And who our wives can blame for it.
Exactly. Right. Actually, my parents blame most of the damage was done so early in my life that my parents were the ones casting aspersions.
Nice.
But so Curt, why don't you start off as the guest?
All right.
Yeah. Actually, I think your crawler just came out of the microwave, so you might want to give it a couple minutes to cool off. And why don't you tell us about your earliest inspiration?
Right. So. Obviously, there are lots of games way, way young, but most of those were just kind of the mainstream stuff. But as I put on my gamer hat and what was...
Wait, I have to ask you, Curt. I just have to stop you now. Talking about games you played when you were young. When you first played Candyland, did you add guns or did you not?
Of course I did. It's every kid's first game.
Just checking. I had to ask. He's on the show. I got it.
Especially was there a traumatic? I mean, there could very well have been some sort of traumatic experience.
Where you was like 2-year-old Curt getting his gingerbread man out of the oven from mom, and he's playing Candyland, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off above his head.
No. It was just it was the sweetest game ever. Every kid loves it.
Right.
And every parent learns to hate it.
Right.
So it was really more being a parent with that game that was inspiration than a kid.
I got it.
But no, for personal inspirations for me, I think the first nod has to go to Dungeons and Dragons.
I think it's probably on all of our lists, actually.
Indeed. Would any of us be here without it? I say no.
What color box?
What was that?
What color was the box?
Oh God! You know what? I didn't even have a box. I started out with the books.
I played Dungeons and Dragons in an envelope, and I loved it.
Yeah,
carved on a rock.
Right.
And honestly, the reason was I didn't. This was not a game I went out and bought and said and tried to convince people to come play with me. Mm-hmm. This was something where I got kind of blindsided. Yeah. And this is a not, almost a non-gamer type story. This is almost like a version of, Dear Penthouse.
Nice. I was gonna say, This is a little different from a Dragon magazine article.
No, it isn't.
Letters to Dragon.
So here I am. I'm in high school, right?
Dear Dragon, there I was.
There it was.
And I'm in drama club, and since 8th grade, I've been hanging out with all the girls from drama club. And, it used to be like we'd have like weekly cast parties even after the show was long gone, and all the guys ended up falling out of it. And it used to be like me and all the sea of women. I'm like, awesome.
Nice.
There you go.
One of those girls, a good friend of mine still, ended up introducing Dungeons and Dragons to all of us.
Wow.
He's living the dream.
That is so... and this was back, like, how many years ago? Holy mackerel. That's, like,
oh my God.
Unheard of, dude.
It was crazy. It was like, 83?
You were living the dream.
I was living the dream. So my first D&D experience was me and all these girls sitting around the table playing
Holy... I don't even... What? So let me get this straight.
He was like,
you
this
got
gamer
into
thing is awesome.
You got into Dungeons and Dragons to pick up chicks? Is that what you're telling me now?
Well, I won't say that there weren't a couple scenarios that there weren't some romantic interest thrown on the table there. So,
wow.
Yep. In fact,
the role playing opportunities are much more interesting.
Indeed,
no
and
lie.
fast. But, so here's the thing: I have never played Dungeons and Dragons that it hasn't been co-ed.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's not many people that can say that. That's
I don't think
amazing.
I've ever played Dungeons and Dragons. Oh no, I have. Never mind.
We have
several times. Okay,
yes.
including with Russ's wife. So let's just move.
More recently, but not at that age. Not at the tender age of puberty, as they say. Wow, that's pretty amazing. That's probably the most interesting story of Dungeons and Dragons I've ever heard. That's pretty.
Here's an interesting question though, Curt. Considering it was mostly with girls, was there more backstabbing involved?
Oh well, see, no. As I've said a couple of times, the whole inspiration for Cutthroat Caverns.
Yeah.
When I used to play with this group, it was all like we were, very Tolkien-esque. It was if we found a magic weapon and it was perfectly suited to this character, that character got it. It was all we're all helping each other along. It wasn't until college when someone first started playing with alignments and brought in an evil assassin character and wiped out half the party because I thought it was fun. And there was that feeling of shock and horror. I just could not even wrap my head around how despicable that, how could someone in our own party be more dangerous than the creatures?
Yeah.
And
wow.
that was the inspiration. I wanted to keep that feeling alive throughout the game. So,
mission accomplished.
Wow,
Indeed.
that's pretty. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, my first, I'm curious about the whole apartment in LA too. Why don't we just go ahead and hit that?
But my apartment in LA.
Yeah.
Well, when I first went out to LA, I was to work in the film business. Which we in fact did. I was on the lovely set of Friday the 13th Part 7.
Cool.
Ooh, there you go.
Phantasm 2. Lots of
Nice.
fabulous films, yeah.
I once dated a girl who was a dead body in Hellraiser 3.
Nice! But no, my apartment in L.A., I was like Jack Tripper. I had two women roommates.
Wow. Holy.
And
Did you have to pretend you were gay?
No.
Oh, okay.
But they're people I knew from college, and they called me up and said, "Hey, you want to come out here and join us in LA? We got a room for you." I'm like, "Okay."
Cool.
So off I went. Yeah, and of course,
Nice.
because we had no money, D&D was a very cheap way to entertain ourselves.
Wow, man, Curt, seriously. You do realize this is not the usual gamer story, right?
Yes, I do.
You said.
He's like, yeah, baby. Who's your
That
daddy?
sound you hear is the cat smiling over the cream.
Who's your daddy?
Well, my
Nice
D&D
picture.
story is not nearly that interesting, but it was my very earliest, even remotely gamer game, and it's hilarious because as I was growing up, my parents kind of wanted me to be normal, and to them, gaming and even fantasy and science fiction weren't really normal. That was not something that anyone in my family had ever been interested in, but I was from a very, very, very early age called to it. The first books that I remember reading on my own are the Narnia Chronicles of Narnia, of course.
Yeah.
And my parents were very, very supportive of that. They would they'd walk me down to the bookstore, and I'd get myself the next book, and they were all excited because it looked like literature. And then the next thing you know, I segue into like all kinds of weird stuff, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. And then I got addicted to reading books to the point where I would get my lunch money at the beginning of every week and not eat lunch, and instead I would spend it on books.
That's hardcore.
Yeah, man, when they found out, they were ticked off. And I do believe we had the quintessential, at least it's not drugs conversation as a teenager. I was like, at least I'm not doing drugs. I'm reading books. And so anyway, so my parents weren't super supportive of that. But my grandparents thought my sense of imagination and all this stuff, they loved it. And they would help me. Like, I was drawing dragons when I was tiny little, and my grandmother helped me write a book, just in a picture book little thing. And my grandparents got me the red box, the original D&D red box,
nice,
because there was a dragon on it. And I draw dragons. And it was very much the, it's got raisins in it. You like raisins conversation from Better Off Dead. Nice. And they were like, look, it's got a dragon on the box. You love dragons. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a game. And I remember opening it and having no clue how to do it. And I didn't have no one knew what this was when I got it. I got it very, very young. I was like 12, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at these books, and then I'm like, oh my God, I can do this, and I can do that, and I can do that. And from that moment on, A, because I was the guy trying to get everybody else involved, and B, just because of my own personality, I was the dungeon master for like years and years after that. And it got me all excited about creating worlds and creating scenarios. And in my head, I was always trying to create a scene. So I would find out what everybody's what everybody wanted to be. And I remember bribing people to join my little games in the campground where we were staying down on Cape Cod. It would be, we had a seasonal spot, really lovely, right near the beach and everything. But most of the other people were, they were there for a week and they were gone. So I would be like, I would have to come up with all new enticements every couple of weeks. And it was like, and I would tailor it to whoever it was. And never girls, Curt. Thank you very much. But I guess you probably sucked up all the luck from almost every gamer in North America. But
I don't like to brag. Oh wait, yes I do.
Yes you do. But I remember telling one kid, like, oh no, you can, and this is way before this was legal. You could be like a half dragon character. And so I was like making this stuff up, and he's like, well, there's a dragon on the cover. I want to be a dragon. So I would be like, oh, we can do that. So it just really excited me that pretty much the sky was the limit. And so right from the very beginning when I opened that box, I don't think I've ever played a role-playing game exactly the way you're supposed to play it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and so I think that's right from the beginning. Because of that, that's why I look at these, and even the 40K role-play books that I do now, like I'm never doing them like in the little world that you're supposed to. I'm creating all these other weird, bizarre things that I do on my own, and I love it. And it really kind of gave my imagination something to spark on, and it's been going ever since.
That's cool. See, just a little build on that. One of my great friends out in college, when he was a great dungeon master, and he decided he wanted to just like kind of throw out the rules set and just kind of use the general guidelines. And he, in our Dungeon and Dragon campaign, decided that we were going to play ourselves and be pulled into the world of the X-Men.
Nice. Cool. That's awesome.
And we actually had to take down the X-Men. And he had a whole chart on what kind of mutant powers you're going to get.
Nice.
And try as he might, and he like tipped the balance so hard, but I kept on rolling blanks. He's like, dude, I'm sorry, that was the last chance I was going to give you. You have no mutant power. So, dude, what the hell am I going to do? And I'm just like, I'm going up against Wolverine. I'm just me. And he's like, yeah, let me think about it a little bit. And he took a bathroom break, and he came back, and he's like, listen, you're supposed to be playing yourself. So I decided that you're just going to have to play yourself with your own unique covert luck. And so I had covert luck power. I got a reroll on everything.
Nice.
Cool.
Did you beat Wolverine?
I ended up taking out Rogue.
Nice.
And as
Well, that's a good pairing because Rogue can't do your power to use against you.
that's right.
Except for luck. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, Dungeons and Dragons made my list also. And so I'll just share my story when I first discovered the game. I was not the alpha gamer on Dungeons and Dragons in my group. Actually, I remember very clearly I was 11 years old, and a friend of mine said, after school, can you come over to my house and stay over tonight? We're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. I said, awesome. How do you win? He said, oh, well, you go in this dungeon and get all the gold, and you fight dragons. Great. How do you win? No, there's no winners. So we went to his house, and he had all the original hardcover books. So the old Dungeon Master's Guide with the Ifrit on the front, and the Player's Handbook with the guy stealing the gems out of the thing's eyes, and all those old books. And I just remember reading through those, and I'm sure we played half of it wrong, and by the end of the night, we were wandering around with +5 Holy Avengers and looking through the magic item section what to buy, We got 80,000 gold to spend from the last dragon we killed, what are we going to get, But we had a blast, and I just couldn't get, it just blew my mind. There was the thing like this you could do and just make up stories with a rules framework. It was really just like telling stories when you were 5 to your brother or sister, but now you're like playing with rules. And so that took off, and my brother and I got really into it, and soon we had everything. And it really was an amazing tool for us because my father was in the military, and we moved to Germany, and we knew nobody. Because when you're in the Army, you just move around all the time, and you don't get to keep friends for a long time. And we were the Dungeons and Dragons kids. We moved in the neighborhood, and we were on the end of a cul-de-sac, and my brother and I just got all the kids in the neighborhood together to play Dungeons and Dragons, and it became this huge thing. And it was just a blast, and it was really sort of the first game for me that really showed how gaming can be used to make friends and be social. Yeah. And that was really, I think, the biggest takeaway from D&D I had. And I played all the kinds of other role-playing games since then. It really was what got me into the whole idea that there's this idea of gaming beyond a board and a fixed rule set and a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. So, Curt, what was your number 2?
All right, so my number 2. My number 2 is Tom Jolly's Wiz War.
Which is actually how this whole conversation started.
It is.
Yes. Yep. To me, Wiz War is the very best beer and pretzels gotcha game that has ever been printed. I absolutely love it and always have.
That's high praise coming from you, the gotcha game king.
Well, you know what? I mean, if you think about it, I know Richard Garfield on Magic the Gathering has certainly, tipped his hat to Tom Jolly and his game. And honestly, it's my entire style of gaming and the type of games that I make that I credit to Wiz War.
Wow.
When I first encountered, I just moved out to L.A. and I was working in the film business, and I mean, I had like literally no money. So I just, like how many times can you eat Taco Bell and Dinty Moore stew? That was so. I started going to these game stores, and the thing was only $15 on the shelf, and I agonized on whether I was going to, make the big investment. But man, I got so much more out of that game, and just it introduced the whole, spell, counterspell, take this, seal you behind a wall.
Yep.
Just so much fun and backbiting that I just fell in love with. It was clear what aspects of Magic the Gathering kind of it's that whole spell counterspell piece that I think really pulled out of Wiz War. But to me, it was like the most engaging hour you could spend because it was just constantly in people's faces. And I begged Tom for years. Wiz War had been out of print for a long time. The license was held up by ChessX, who owned the license but refused to print it. And I said, Tom, please, I'd love to get it back on shelves. And he wasn't ready at that time. And honestly, Fantasy Flight I think was probably a good choice for him. And I'm delighted to see that it's back on shelves. My only reservation is I'm one of those crusty old guys, waving my fist in the air. There are a couple of changes that they made to the game that I don't know that I would have made just because I have such a.
You're a purist. It's okay.
I'm a purist.
It's okay to be a purist.
So, but I think the biggest thing that the biggest change that they made that I don't love is the point system for winning, and the fact that you can't lose when 2 of your treasures get dropped on someone else's bases. To me, the ability to have to defend yourself as well as mess with other people is part of that frenetic back and forth that I really loved about it. So, So when I play with the old rules.
I was going to say, house rules fix that.
Yeah, exactly right.
The components are definitely awesome in the new version, and I actually hadn't played Wiz War before until the Fantasy Flight version, and I had to say I was most impressed with the game. It was a lot of fun, and you could tell that it's one of those games that transcends time, and even though it's quite an old game, it still plays great, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I've been trying to play it for over a month now.
I tell you what, let's get together because I'm itching.
Gen Con, baby.
Cool. There you go.
Let's do it.
You're only like 6 hours away.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing I kind of miss is Tom Jolly on his original version. He's not an artist, but he scrawled all the little cartoony figures on all these things, and all the wizards just look ridiculous. There was something about the cheesiness of it that went along with the gameplay, and so when I see the Fantasy Flight version, I'm like, wow, it's not that serious a game, man.
Yeah, well, that's one of the.
It's very serious.
I think that's actually, I think, a problem with the Fantasy Flight version is because it looks so serious, people take it too seriously, and may get too vested in the game that's really supposed to be very light and simple and fun.
I've heard several people say that.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a very serious. I mean, the plastic models are cool, and the artwork's all cool and wizardy, and
Go on Board Game Geek and take a look at the pictures from the original, you can see yourself with a big pint of beer right next to the game at that point. That's its natural habitat.
Nice. So, Craig, what's your second one there?
Well, my second one is my first, what I would call the gamer game, and I've got a couple of these, actually several of these in my list are those old. It was the Milton Bradley, right? The Game Master series.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Master series. Yeah.
And the first one that I ever played was Axis and Allies.
Nice.
And I had no idea what I was getting into, and I had never played Risk or Stratego or any of those. I had actually somehow bypassed all of that. And so this was my first introduction to any kind of a strategic, war game, and I thought it was awesome. I felt like I was in a World War II movie, and I was moving my little guys around on the board, and it takes so long to play that game that we only played it once or twice a year, so it never got the replayability issue never really arose. Because you only playing it once or twice a year, and you had to relearn it every time. But that was the very first game that I bought. Was that, and I just loved it. And to this day, I have it somewhere. I know I have it, and I have all the pieces and in their little styrofoam trays that you broke apart,
little polystyrene trays there.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. And it really inspired me to really enjoy and appreciate games on that big scale that where you're moving forces all over the world. And I really liked you went from, Dungeons and Dragons where it was like 4 guys and you're in a dungeon, and now you're like, there's the whole globe and you're moving all of these forces all over the place, and it's really epic. And it was probably the main reason I got into Epic when it finally came out.
There you go.
Yeah, so Axis and Allies was a huge signpost for me for these big war games that to this day, in case you hadn't listened to the episode 100 Super Rap, I like games where I can blow things up and kill people.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Well, I had games like that when I was very young. Actually, there's 2 games that I blame for my love of awesome components and a lot of bling in a board game. And my family had tons of games. We were those families that you go in the basement and your parents had bought all these games, and we had Stratego and Risk and Monopoly and Life and electronic Stratego, all those games. And one of the games, the 2 coolest games I thought we had, and no one else I knew had these games. One of them was Carrier Strike, and one of them was Chopper Strike.
Carrier Strike was awesome.
Carrier Strike is probably one of the best produced games ever, and of its time, it was still fantastic. So Carrier Strike came with this massive board, And it was really a battle between 2 Japanese aircraft carriers and 2 American aircraft carriers. And the board was covered with hexes on a blue ocean surface. Now, the bits, though, for this game, and it came out like, I don't know what, Kurt, it was like early 80s, late 70s. It was really old. Yeah. And it had, each side had 2 plastic aircraft carriers that took up like 3 or 4 hexes each, okay? And then it also came with airplanes. And these airplanes were 3-dimensional plastic airplanes that they were on little flight stands. But the flight stands were L-shaped. So imagine the plane's on the top of a bracket, and then it goes, the stand comes off the left wing, goes down, and there's a stand under it. So the wing, when it's flying in the air, the airplane's like over this little base. The base is then slotted into the bottom of the aircraft carriers. So when you slotted the bases in, the planes looked like they were sitting on the flight deck of the carrier. And when you launched them, they flew off. Now, it gets even better, though. Then each side had a bunch of torpedo tokens, or plastic tokens, that went into the bottom of the airplane's base. So when the planes are flying around, they each had 1 torpedo token in the airplane. When you launched a torpedo, you just tipped your plane forward, and it would slide out onto the hex in front of the plane. And then each turn, your torpedoes would go along and follow a straight line, hopefully hitting the enemy carrier. If you hit an enemy carrier, it got even cooler because there was a special slot on the side of the carrier where you could inject the torpedo tokens to mark damage on the carriers. It was so cool with all the plastic parts and the airplanes and there were little decals on everything, and they were all molded in the right gray plastic. It looked just great on the table. It actually had a lot of strategy to it. It was a really fun game. Did you play that game, Kurt?
You know it. Yeah, that was an amazing game. And what's great is they re-released it a couple of years ago, and I picked a copy up for my son.
They did?
Yes, they did.
How did I miss that? Oh, is it still out, or I got to go on eBay and get it now?
I think you have to go to eBay.
Oh, I totally missed that. Oh,
yeah.
It was awesome.
I saw it, and they were like $5 each. I mean, it was like crazy. Yeah, it was like Russ.
How did I miss that? I got to get that.
Because I'd had it when I was a kid. You know, it went the way of all toys in my parents' house. And boy, I tell you what, I saw that, and I tried to get my son all hooked into it. He wasn't having it, but I had a great time.
Oh, I love it. Now, the other game that was, I think it was by the same, and it might have been Milton Bradley. It was very popular. It was Milton Bradley. Some major publisher did it. The other game, and I think it was sort of in the same line, because it was called Chopper Strike. Now, Chopper Strike was a 2-level board. The bottom level was like a board, and it was done up with, it was all covered with squares. It was a grid, but it was all done up like you were in vegetation and some kind of like jungle terrain. And then each side and the bottom board had a fleet of Jeeps with little missile launchers on the back, rocket launchers. They were little plastic model Jeeps. And then above this was a clear plastic board that had 4 legs that come off the corners of the bottom board with clear plastic, and that also had a grid etched into it. And above there you had a number of helicopters that were also completely rendered in 3D. And so you'd move your helicopters on the top, sort of like very simple chess-like or checkers-like moves, and you move your Jeeps on their bottom. And if you ever added directly above or below a Jeep, the Jeep could shoot a rocket at a helicopter, or a helicopter could bomb the Jeep. And you go back and forth in this little sort of like advanced 2-tier checker game, but it was just really, really cool. I like that one as well. So those are 2 games that Chopper Strike and Carrier Strike really showed how mechanics and really cool components could make a game just really come alive to me. And those are the 2 games that really inspired me to look for games that have that kind of stuff in them.
Yeah. Cool. Now, so my third one now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but, people either love it or hate it now. But Magic the Gathering was a huge, huge game for me. When I remember going into my local comic book store, opening up the comic book news and reading a little press release, and I just like smelled the ink, and I was like, "Holy crap, this is going to be freaking gold!" if you know my partner Justin and I, obviously the type of games we tend to build, we just like slapping each other around with cardboard, and this continues to be the game that we bring along to cons with us.
Nice.
So,
well, it is a popular game, no doubt about that, and definitely inspired a lot of gamers. So,
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. That's all we'll say.
What's your third, Craig?
Well, I call this the first miniatures game that I ever played, and I hadn't even thought about it until today when I was working on my thoughts for this little get together here. And it was the first naval combat game that I ever played either. Mm-hmm. And I am, of course, referring to Broadsides and Boarding Parties.
That game was awesome. I own that, too. That's a fantastic game.
That's the only one of these games that I actually still have, and I have all of its components, and I know where it is.
Yep.
I know Axis and Allies is somewhere at my parents' house, but I know for a fact that Broadsides and Boarding Parties is right now less than 10 feet away from me in the stack from PattyCon, in case anybody wanted to play
and
it.
may I just add, this is yet another reason why pirates are cooler than ninjas, because ninjas have no equivalent awesome board game.
No, there is not even a close ninja board game like this. Broadsides and Boarding Parties, where you're navigating, you're sailing, your Age of Sail, Man of War through the Caribbean, and you can shoot your broadsides at them, and it's certain cannons, and then on the course you've got the ship on the side, so it's like 25 millimeter or maybe 20 millimeter guys. So all your guys are on the ship, and then when you crash into each other, then your guys are moving around, and I mean it's very simplistic. But what it was like my first mini, and I loved it. I loved the idea that the model on the big map was the ship, but it also was represented by the big ship over here with all the guys and the cannons on it.
Yeah, keep in mind, and the left side of the board is this little tiny grid where you each have small, 1 inch high little ships that are moving around. But on the right side of the board are these almost foot long, fully detailed ships with masts and everything, fully populated with plastic crew and plastic cannons.
I think my version was a little bit different.
Oh,
because
really?
My version on either margin is where your ships are.
One ship's on either side.
Ships,
right.
And the center, the majority of the board is a big, vast, beautiful looking map of the Mediterranean with all these straight line points on it, and basically what you're doing, it very much like Wings of War. You're putting down your maneuver cards. Mm-hmm. So each of you can't see what you're maneuvering, and you flip over the card. Oh, I'm going straight. Oh, I'm now turning 1 degree to port. And as you take damage, you have to replace your movement cards with damage cards. I mean, it's very simple, but very, very in depth for what it was. And I loved it. And from that moment on, I've been looking for naval combat games that would give me, again, you can see there's sort of a pattern forming. Now I like war games. So then with Broadsides and Boarding Parties, I found a very fast moving, quick, simple board game, war game. And so that's really like, I don't have a lot of patience for like the Star Trek, fleet, whatever, Starfleet battles thing. I mean, those are BattleTech. Anything that took a long, long time and had a lot of record keeping with it, I just didn't have the patience for it. But something like Broadsides and Boarding Parties, I could play over and over. I would rather play that like 10 times in a row than play one of those other more complicated games. And I loved it, and I still have it. I even made sails for my ships, for my big ships, because you have the masts and you have the spars, but obviously there's no sails. I actually went and made paper sails. That was in military school that I made those, now that I think of it. So clearly, I don't know what was going on there. I think I had a little extra free time because it was a dry campus. I don't know. But yeah, so Broadsides and Boarding Parties for me was a huge game as far as where I went and how I got here.
That's a great game. See, my third one. So this one, I was racking my brain about because I remember the first when we were younger. My brother and I got into D&D. Like I said, when I was around 11 or 12, we did discover the miniatures for D&D, and so we started when this first came out. We got the original little boxes they came in little boxes, and they had little sets of dudes. We started painting those, and we didn't really have. This is back before D&D had any kind of miniature combat rules. It was just so much as we want to keep track of where my guy is on the table. But the first real miniature war game that we got was called, and I couldn't remember the name of this, so I called my brother today. I'm like, John, what was the game we used to play? It had the little superheroes in it. One guy was like a flame dude. One guy was like, oh, that was Superheroes and Supervillains.
I was going to say, that's clear why you couldn't remember the name of that game.
Right. So I quickly Googled it, and I found it. It's still out there. It's called Superheroes and Supervillains. It came out in 1981. We got it the year it came out. And it was my first miniature game because in the box, this game blew my mind, It says, play on the floor or on your table without a board. I'm like, what? Play a game without a board? What's that about? And you opened it up, and it said, it had a little tape measure in there, and it had a bunch of little metal miniatures, and it said, use magazines or books to represent different buildings in the city where you're doing battle, and each book should be, X number of stories, and that's how you can determine height. So this is back in the day when, parents still gave their kids, like, Encyclopedia Britannica, because there was no such thing called the internet, and your parents would save magazines. My mom saved all the National Geographic magazines, I don't know, for like 20 years, with the idea that if you ever had a school project to research, you have to go look it up in a National Geographic magazine, right? Because there's how else are you going to find out? It's not like you can go Google it. So my brother and I would raid the magazine stacks, and we would go in and we'd make different height buildings, and 3 National Geographics was one story. We work it all out. And this game was like, it was a very generic. It didn't have a license, so it wasn't like Marvel or DC. And it was kind of funny because it had the Knights of Justice with like the Crimson Crusader and the Hornets and Dragonflame versus the evil guys, the Syndicate of Terror with Dr. Death. And they were all clear ripoffs of major, Dr. Death, Dr. Doom. He had Pyro and Behemoth. And it was we just had so much fun with it. There were definitely balance issues. I remember after a while feeling like certain characters were kind of overwhelming, but it didn't matter. It was just a great way. And we learned more about. It's really where I came up with the idea that it's okay to not have a board and use a tape measure to move and dice for combat, all that kind of stuff built in. It really was my first true miniature war game, and I really have fond memories of that game even to now.
A realistic game of comic book combat played with miniature figures.
Yes, indeed.
Adventuring game kit.
It was really cool.
It.
Well, now, Craig, you mentioned Starfleet Battles a moment ago.
I did,
and how you were looking for like some more approachable games. Well, I also was introduced to Starfleet Battles when I was out in LA and had a great time with it. In fact, God knows how my wife hates games, but she actually would play Starfleet Battles with me.
Yeah, wow. See, I'm right there with you, Curt. Starfleet Battles is awesome.
I think there's a probability distortion field around you where women in gaming is concerned.
It does seem like that.
But her rule was that she had to play the Klingons because it didn't matter if she died because at least the battle was glorious.
I love it. Wow, Curt, you got a good one there. You got a good one.
Yeah.
Does she shout Kapla when she went into battle and everything?
No.
Oh, wow,
didn't get that far. But so my fourth one is actually kind of like a cleaner version of that game. Very into Star Trek Red Alert. And
nice.
I don't know if you guys remember this one, but it was a very short-lived game, and it was Discourse based.
Oh, nice!
And it had all the new gen ships on it, and they essentially you'd flip the little pogs over to move your ships through space.
Oh, cool!
And you had the range markers and those kind of things, and it was expandable and collectible, and you punched all the pogs out of the sheets. And it was an amazing simulation of space combat, and all the crew, you got to kind of log onto your ship, and they'd give you different powers and abilities. Really clean, elegant design. I loved it, and it died an early death because all of a sudden the company who made it ended up with both the Star Wars and the Star Trek license at once.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and so Warner said, no, sorry, pull it. Bye-bye.
Wow. Oops.
So it was only like 8 months into its launch, and they had to kill it. And I was a big fan, and I was involved in this online community where one of the designers actually got on and released all the data for what the coming expansion was going to be. All the different ships and their powers and the crew and everything that had been built and play tested, but it was just data on an Excel sheet.
Oh wow! That's cool.
And of course, I'm a graphic artist, and I could take a look at the templates they had and say, you know what, I could make these look identical.
Oh, cool!
So I published and shared online that expansion, and then we crowdsourced a new expansion with new ideas following that. I worked on this thing for 2 years.
Wow!
And it was at that point that someone finally said, dude, why don't you just make your own games?
There you go.
And,
Nice.
And I said, well, that kind of makes sense. So that's actually kind of like what the game I got so involved in that it actually got me off my rump and started thinking about my own games.
Look at that. Kickstarted you, if you will, into your own
Indeed.
game. Well, look at that. Nice. That's awesome. Craig, what was your fourth one there?
My fourth one was Conquest of the Empire, which was the last of the Game Master series that I really got into because I love Rome and the Roman Empire. And
that's a good
Roman
one too.
history.
I like that one also. Yeah.
and it was neat. But it was also the kind of game that at that point, that was where I was like, man, there's got to be something more out there. Because it was like, I was Game Master Series'd out, I think, at Conquest of the Empire. And so although I loved the theme and I liked the game, and you can see all over the internet, if you look at my Uncharted Seas stuff, where you can find everywhere, you can see pieces from Conquests of the Empire showing up all over the place as buildings and statues. So I did have it, and I still have pieces, but I'm using them now for terrain. I liked it a lot, but it kind of like it spurred me to start looking at other games and other possibilities for things that could really kind of scratch that itch, if you will, but in a more complex sort of way. Cool. So I liked it, and I still like it, but it was kind of like, okay, now I want to go to the next level, kind of.
Yep. That one's still in my brother's basement. We had the entire Master Series. We had all the games, including Fortress America and Shogun.
Fortress America was really the jump the shark for me.
You didn't like that one?
No, it was like, yeah.
If Fantasy Flight's doing it again, if you want to pick it up.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Well, for me, Starfleet Battles was huge for me. Actually, it like Curt with his Star Trek game. This actually influenced me not only for gaming but also for my later career in a way, because a huge Star Trek fan. My brother was too, and again, one of the things that happens when you're in a military family. Really, your brother is someone who you're going to play most of your games with. So 2-player games with a lot of depth were awesome for us, and we would set up Starfleet Battles. We'd set up the ping pong table, and we'd remove the net and set up Starfleet Battles on the ping pong table and just leave it set up for like a week. And just play it every night, play a little bit of it. And where it influenced my career was the game was super complex. I remember having a massive D-ring binder with all the rules, and I'd get all the variants printed out and inject them in there. And, I mean, our fleets are so big because there were rules for fighters, and there were rules for, we'd have 20 ships in our fleet, and some of these ships were launching 30 fighters, and every one of these things had these little stat sheets with all the little shields on them and the shield boxes. And so I would go on the computer, and I would write software to manage all your fleet tracking. So I wrote it all in original BASIC on my IBM PC and all this stuff. And we printed. I had a routine that printed out all the fighters and their stats and labeled them all ABCD to match the tokens, and did all that stuff. And it really got me into programming in a way. But it also was I really got into the super nerdy games there also. I loved the idea of the depth of the game, the tactics, and the long playing games. And the reason I've only gotten out of those as I got older was simply you don't have the time anymore to play this game. But that still appeals to me, and I get that satisfaction now from the more in-depth computer strategy games. But back then, really the only way to get that kind of level of depth was really with these advanced board games. And Starfleet Battles just really hit all the buttons. Nice tactical combat, and was at an age where I really wanted to learn, get into rules that deep. And just really cool, and Star Trek, which was one of my favorite sci-fi licenses. So good stuff. Yeah. So Starfleet Battles definitely hit me strong.
All right, well, if I got time for one more,
you do. Let's squeeze it in, baby. We got
all right. I'm just gonna throw out there basically the whole cheap ass game line. Mm-hmm. And interesting. It's not like any one particular game, but I found this whole line kind of an inspiration because James Ernest he stuck a flag in the sand and he said, you know what, this is what I stand for. You own all the dice, you own all the everything else you need. I'm just going to give you what you need, and it's going to be cheap, and you can have a lot of fun with it. Nice. But what was important about that was that he had a real vision, a real mission. It's so many companies are just we make games that are fun,
right.
Which it's kind of hard to distinguish yourself when that's kind of your mission statement. And he had something that was really unique. So when I was going to build Smirk and Dagger, I was like, well, what's the one thing that's going to help me stand out in this whole sea of other companies? And so I took inspiration from him just in creating a company that stood for something, really.
Right.
Although this is unconfirmed rumor, but I had heard from someone that he almost felt like I took over his niche.
So, yeah, but your games aren't cheap ass though. I mean, your games are I don't.
Oh no, and I think it was more he had killed Dr. Lucky, which was kind of a takeoff on an old family favorite, and I came out with Candyman, and his original version was just black and white paper. which was what I was going to do until I showed it to distributors and retailers at the Gamma Trade Show, and they were like, oh, "What have you done? No, full color, nice box, whatever price you put on it, we'll sell the crap out of it. Go ahead."
Nice.
And, but just kind of standing for something, and looking at his line, that's kind of what inspired me a bit too.
Very cool. Very cool.
Devil Bunny needs a hand.
Nice.
Have you ever played that game?
I have not, but now I want to.
Oh my god, it's just funny.
Well, it sounds good.
So what's your last one, Craig?
My last one is, I don't have a lot to say about it because I didn't play it a lot, but when I went to Norwich and I first got in touch with the gaming club there, Norwich University Tactics Society, a.k.a. Nuts, they were in a Johnny Reb phase. And so I got to see these huge Civil War battlefields all set up. And Johnny Reb, I believe, is at 15 millimeter or maybe even smaller than that. And so it's all these little tiny guys. And I had seen mini games before, like at the mall where the hobby store would set up a big World War II tank battle once a year in the middle of the mall to kind of get people's interest going. So I knew they kind of existed, but I didn't know what they were. And Johnny Reb was my first opportunity to actually play them. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really neat. And I probably would still be playing it to this day if right after I got into the club and I hadn't even bought anything yet for Johnny Reb, they all got into Epic Warhammer 40,000.
And your path was changed forever.
And it was changed forever. And the rest, as they say, is history. But it was Johnny Reb over 20 years ago that first introduced me to the full-blown miniatures war game.
Nice. Well, see, my last one is sort of like Starfleet Battles. It is BattleTech.
Yeah.
Now, BattleTech was huge for me because my brother and I, the other thing we got really into was Robotech, the TV series. So this is the mid-'80s. The Macross series just come out. It was coming on every day at like 4:30 where we lived. And so we would record it on a Betamax. Yes, folks. On a Betamax every day. We watch it religiously. And then lo and behold, we go to a store one day, and on the shelf is this black box with a Warhammer battle mech on the front, which is right out of the series. And oh my God, they have rules for the Vertitex. Now, see, this is back before BattleTech got in trouble with the license and got, had to change everything. But back then, they had a lot of the mechs right out of Robotech. So we had to try this game. And we fell in love. It was just awesome. And BattleTech eventually became the game that we really first tried to kick up a notch. So as the plastic battle mechs started coming out, we started getting them and painting them and trying to make the tables look better. Yeah. And it really sort of became and trying to make cool terrain. And we would get like little balls of cotton to mark where the fires were, and started doing a lot of the things that would later become very standard for us in miniature war games. BattleTech was the first one, even though it was a board game with a hex grid on it, it started feeling like a miniature war game at the same time. And again, like Starfleet Battles, we leave it set. We come back from, even in college, come back from Thanksgiving break, we set it up on Thursday, and we'd leave it up all weekend long, playing big battles. And it was just very, very many fond memories. It's a game, I love, and I can still break out the exact same rule set today and play it. I just did not too long ago. It's just a great game. I'm glad to see it's still in production, and it's not too clunky. It's got a lot of meat to it, and it could definitely get clunky if you want to. But it's also a game you can play with just a couple mechs and have a great time and still get done in a reasonable amount of time. So it's a great game, and it still holds up even today. So is that all of our game discussion there?
Dungeon Quest Robo Rally Lunch Money.
Nice.
Wow.
Like, Craig,
that was almost Russ-like.
That was pretty good. Yeah, I could go on about computer games. I left those all out. I was pretty good about that. Ancient Art of War, by the way, old school Broderbund. Ancient Art of War, great video game.
I don't even know what a Broderbund is.
Broderbund, old computer game company. They're gone now. Long dead. They were famous. They were most famous for the game Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. That was their claim to fame. Yep. Before that, they made Ancient Art of War, though it was awesome. Okay. So, anything else, Curt? The guy's giving us the evil eye over here at Dunkin' Donuts. He's giving us a stink eye.
They don't like us staying any later than absolutely necessary.
Right.
I never even heard them say last call.
No, they don't. They don't. Then they think you're going to go buy more stuff.
Right.
They don't want you to buy more stuff.
Well, Curt, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Lost Chapters here. Really appreciate it.
No problem, guys.
And
Glad here.
we look forward to having on episode 101.
101,
baby. Another palindrome episode.
D6 Generation 101, your introductory class. D6 Generation for non-majors.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.